My name is Attila Thorday. I live in Szeged, southeast of Hungary, where I am a parish priest and at the same time a professor at the Faculty of Theology. The church where I feel at home, where I grew up, is a community of followers of Jesus. My home is in the Catholic Church, which means that wherever I am worldwide, I feel at home when celebrating the Eucharist with the Catholic community of believers. On the other hand, my aspect also has a temporal dimension, since for 2000 years I have been standing in the line of people who have received the same teachings of Jesus, where are the followers of Christ. I follow in the footsteps of people who became saints in the most diverse situation of life, and I follow their example on my own life's journey, of course. So I do not see the history of my church as a chronicle of scandals, but as a miracle of grace. Spiritually fallible people like me and spiritually fragile communities have been renewed successfully by this grace. I think this is a real testimony to the power of God. The meaning of politics originally was public service for those living in the polis, a community of citizens. Jesus warned his disciples, "Whoever wants to be greater than others, let him be at the service of others." On this basis, I deeply respect those politicians who have selflessly served the common good for others. Life is not black and white, so different perspectives and interests may clash in politics. I am convinced that the end does not justify the means in either case. One should not resort to immoral means and methods for the sake of what is considered to be a good end. He who takes the sword will perish by the sword. Jesus warns Peter with this sentence when he tries to protect his master. There is a saying in Hungarian, "The only thing worse than politics is church politics." This bitter statement stems from the historical experience when these two institutional realities transcended their powers to subjugate the other. The masses that were at stake, both politics and church politics, always fought for more power in communities. I think this historical tendency has almost completely disappeared in our region. The church, in this sense, is not powerful enough today to compete with state politics. Today we seek a partner, supporter in state politics, rather than a rival. Today, in Christian-rooted countries, there is a legal separation of church and state. In contrast, we know that this is not the case in Muslim-majority countries under Islamic jurisdiction. The legal separation of politics and church has been reflected in the fact that on one hand, the Catholic Church does not exercise public authority. For example, a Catholic bishop cannot be member of parliament anymore. On the other hand, the secular state has not been considered competent to decide theological and canonical issues. For example, the Church is openly against abortion, active euthanasia, or gender reassignment surgeries, but in a political sense, it is not the teachings of the institutional Church that will influence legislation, but rather state politicians, members of parliament with a Christian identity, will advocate for the legislation of the stance of the Church, legalization of the stance of the Church. In the last 50 years, religion has tended to become an inner choice for spiritual freedom, focusing on the 2,000-year-old values and teachings of Jesus Christ. The institutional Church considers itself a sui generis reality, a corporation with the same rights as the state, but only within its territory. Its fundamental aim is to lead its members to salvation, but it does not expect or receive any means from the state to achieve this goal. A religious person is not only a member of religious community, but also a citizen. So Church and society cannot be separated in the human sense. Church and society must seek to work together for the common good. Any type of abuse within the community of the Church or any other type of community is against the common good. These are crimes that should involve legal consequences after legal investigations. Those political parties who fiercely use these cases of abuse as part of their political programs, campaigning against the Church, I am convinced, are not for the common good either. The dirty diaper must always be changed and thrown away, but never the child. What about the political elections? Some party politicians come to church regularly, and I consider them believers, church members, disregarding their political commitments. But if a party politician turns up at a church some weeks before the elections, although I let him to do, because anyone can walk through the door open to all, I won't let him speak to the community of believers as a parish priest, and I won't let him use the church for his purposes. The church has a solid and proven social teaching. Solidarity and subsidiarity have been taught and practiced for almost 2,000 years. I am convinced that the Church must not support any political parties, but rather demonstrate God's eternal values. But it is essential to fix that Christian people are also citizens of their countries, and they have legal right to be represented in politics. They have the legal right and freedom to represent their own values and moral interest, since we live in a democracy. So, before political elections, it is crucial for them, just like it is crucial for all citizens, to see clearly which parties can stand up for their values and interests. From this point of view, they also need to look at what the leading politicians have done so far, so that we can rely not just on their promises or rhetoric, but also on their previous achievements. What about financial support from the state? Some political parties accuse the Church of reaching out to the state to gain support. They consider this immoral and want to stop it if they win the elections. This is their party politics. But like family or the state, the Church also has institutional frameworks which cannot be neglected since we must receive, conserve, and pass them on to future generations. We are responsible for our common goods and values, which we want to pass on to posterity. This is why I am unsurprised and don't object to the fact that the Church performing public duties in our country receives state funding. Beside normative support for public services, there are also tender funds intended for the Church, which many parties object to, saying leading parties are buying our votes. If they did not do this, how would we pass on to posterity the cultural and material assets that through the Church are an integral part of our culture and history? If we don't renovate the house constantly, our children will inherit ruins. There were times when political forces destroyed everything that resembled the Church. Didn't they become much poorer as a result? As a parish priest, I am, in a secular terminology, a middle leader in the Church. I have superiors whose word I listen to, but at the same time, I have many people entrusted to me. My primary concern is their spiritual welfare on earth and eternal salvation in heaven. Still, I am also concerned for them as fully human beings. They need a community place, a church building for the services, to live out their faith and community life. These places heal the whole society. Paul writes, I can abound and I can be in need. This is a great inner freedom for every believer. That is why the Church has not disappeared so far. During the time of dictatorial atheism, most of our properties were confiscated by political forces, but we are still here to serve the people with the help of our Lord Jesus Christ. In 1987, when I was in France, I met philosopher Tatiana Goischeva. She was a philosophy teacher at the Leningrad University of the Soviet Union in the 1970s, when Orthodox Christian faith touched and permeated her life. She said that from then on, the conviction of Christian faith became a feature of her philosophical lectures. The university party leadership called her to account and not only threatened her with expulsion from the faculty, but also openly presented her with two choices: either to be deported to Siberia or to leave the country immediately and never return to her homeland. This alternative led her to move to France, where her prospects were better. There, she wrote her book, which she gave me, Parler de Dieu est dangereux, which means talking about God is dangerous. Surprisingly, her book does not write about the danger of Soviet atheist propaganda, but rather about what she experienced in the West in the 80s. Gorishtcheva realized that the Church had not been openly persecuted by dictatorial state power in Western societies, but had become weightless and discredited by a kind of welfare superficiality. That is the real danger or challenge facing the Church today. That is what we also witness here in Hungary. We live in a liquid society where the stability of the fireproof values of the Catholic Church can be questioned from all sides at any time. So it seems to be more dangerous to talk about God in a consumer and liquid society than it was in the days of dictatorships. Today, I am responsible for finding out how to live an authentic life rooted in Christian values and my faith. First, I am reflecting on myself. What can I do as a person, a pastor and teacher for my fellow human beings, especially those entrusted to my care with love and tender attention? What can we do in this historic situation? It has been a challenge to live here and now. I can seek God's loving and caring will to fit my life into it. That is, to do what I can for others with love. I believe religious and non-religious people, believers and agnostics, can work together for society's common good. I believe in this possibility of connecting values and bringing different people together. So the Church's task is to discover and follow God's will so that we can shape world's events in collaboration with all people of goodwill. The fashionable word resilience is a good expression, especially after COVID. We need to build resilience not only against physical pathogens, but also against extreme ideologies. This requires a responsible and devoted attitude. The Gospel of Matthew preserves Jesus' call to build our life on a rock and not on a sand, for a wind will come, the rain, the flood will come, and the house will be rained on. He repeats it in a refrain because it is natural. It means not to rush when it comes, but to prepare well in advance. To use another image, trees with large foliage can only survive a storm if they have deep and spreading roots. I often ask this question, I cannot find my way alone. Who do I listen to? And I usually answer this. I don't want to listen to political leaders, but I want to listen to the conscience of my heart. In my personal prayer, I rely on God, our Creator and Sustainer of all things, while, on the other hand, I take seriously the specific instruction of my Church. This is an obvious way for me to find my answers. Can a believer abuse anyone by his faith? Faith is a relationship in someone's heart with God. So if it has deep roots in the heart, It cannot be harmful or abusive to others. Religiosity is a different concept. It can be abusive. If a politician goes to church to gather votes the week before the election, this can be abusive because he wants to be seen as religious, but we don't see him from the next day. Can someone hide something behind the religiosity in an abusive way? Yes, certainly can. But we have talked about this before. There will always be those in every human community who abuse trust or distort the reality of the mission entrusted to them by a real charisma. I think it is an abusive behavior, what we call triumphalism, when I consider myself superior because I am religious. In the time of Jesus, it was possible to make a living from the religiosity. This is what the Pharisees did. Nowadays, it is a very distant reality. It is not the main temptation of the church. When the church does not isolate itself in the consciousness of its superiority, it is to serve society. This is what we learned from Christ, that a true leader is the one who serves others. We must not separate ourselves we must remain in the service of society as Christ asked us to do. Christian theology is about speaking about the tension between the already yes and the not yet. For example, we are saints by baptism, but must also become saints by our deeds, like salt and leaven. In its smallness is present in the dough. So we Christ-following believers are invited by our Master to be a vital and influential minority of the whole family of humanity, preserving the real taste of life. The concept of synodality has become very popular in the Catholic Church. Pope Francis offers the community-centered discernment, having been practiced already in the monastic life for centuries, to the universal church of our time. So, not through majority voting, but by listening attentively to different human experiences, we realize the truth, and by grasping the prompting of God's Holy Spirit. This method is truly meant to prevent any type of abuse in the name of religion, dialogue and sharing. I should not seek to convince others of my truth, but should bravely and openly reveal my insights on the issue at hand to enrich the experience of others. Jesus has promised and poured His Spirit on the Church to teach us all that is truly important in life, and He will not disappoint us. We can show up our constant exchange to our fellow humans through which we are faithful to Christ. I feel at home in a church where I am listened to attentively, where I can listen to others, where I am allowed to speak honestly, and where we are in presence of God of love. Synodality does not break up the structure of the church, but opens a new ways of cooperation. I long for a culture of conversation where I can honestly reveal my insights to my superiors, so as to support them to making good decisions. I don't want to be demanding, and I don't expect them to decide as I would. But if I had the space to reveal my insights without fear of retribution, I feel free, since I am able to participate in the process of discernment in the Spirit. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for letting me speak freely about crucial topics. And thank you for your attention to the real mission of our Church.